Um, Thanks everybody for coming today and taking this time to just get some more information about the Seeding Creativity Grant. My name is Melissa Cerrone and I'm the program manager for the Office of Arts and Culture. And I'm joined by Diana Rufner, also from the Office of Arts and Culture. So the way that we're going to schedule this time today is in the very beginning, I'm just going to spend a little bit of time giving you all an overview of the general questions that I'm hearing from the community and some of the issues that I've seen so far with the grant applications that have come in to date. We've had a chance to look at about 65 applications, which gives us a sense of some of the things that people are doing well and some of the things that people might want to pay attention to and make their applications stronger or fix things that were actually a problem. So after we finish that, we'll talk about some issues and then we're going to go straight to your questions. We're asking everybody to stay on mute while others are talking. So the way that we're going to work the question and answer section is we are going to use the raise hand in the on your screen, and we're going to just sort of go down the list of people that have raised their hands using their little hand emoji, and I'll call on you and you can then unmute and ask your question. And to be sure that everybody has a turn, I'm going to ask you all to ask only one question. So once everybody's had a chance to ask that one question, then we can go back around the room and people can feel free to ask some more questions. But I did want to make sure that we get to everybody. We have 2 hours, but there are a lot of people here today and that time could go by quickly. And if you don't want to speak up or if you can't, you don't have the option to do it, you can put your question in the chat. So we might answer like about 10 questions and then we'll pop over to the chat and we'll answer some questions there and then we'll go back to the live questions. So you have the option to do whatever works for you. Keep your camera on, don't keep your camera on, whatever makes you comfortable. So before we begin with the Q&A, I wanted to go over some of the things that I'm noticing in the applications that we've read so far and some of the errors that are going to be helpful if we clear them up right now before you submit. Most of you or many of you probably have something that you've already started and you haven't submitted it yet. I really encourage you to take some time. You're not in a huge rush to submit, so really look at it and make sure you get it right. If we do see errors for the next few days, we can probably go in there and open it up for you and you can fix some of those errors if there's something that's readily fixable. We do expect there to be, we've done some counting, probably between 350 and 400 applications for this grant. And remember, we can only award 45 grants. So I just want to say it's going to be a pretty competitive process. So you're going to want to make sure that you've submitted the best application that you can to position yourself as best as possible. And I know this process may be new to many of you. And if you don't work in a discipline where you've had to submit grant applications before, the process may seem a little strange. And the way that we're looking at things might be different from what you're used to. So if you're someone who's promoting an album, for example, you may not have gone through a grant process like this and you're finding it extra challenging. So I just want to be able to give you some support. So no matter what your project is, you're doing the best application you can. So the advice I would give to everybody before you submit is please, please, please give your application to somebody else to read before you submit it. Give it to somebody who you trust, maybe someone who's familiar with your work. Ask them if it describes you well as an artist, because we're really asking you to kind of show us who you are as an artist and make sure that it reads in a way that you would really want it to read. And then ask them to look at your project concept. And if they can tell you by reading what you've said, what you plan to do, where you will have a tangible result at the end of the project, and they absolutely understand what you're going to be doing, then you're probably on the right track. But if you send it to somebody that you know and they're still saying, well, but I know who you are, but I'm not really sure, what are you going to do with the money if you get it? Then you probably want to go back and be more clear. I think you have enough words in the word count to really be as clear as you possibly can. So obviously the biggest general issues are eligibility. We really want you to read what projects and expenses are eligible and which ones are not. I'm seeing some example of ineligible projects here. So for example, and these are all things that I'm seeing, you can't use the funds to put a down payment on a new building or a studio space. That is ineligible. You can't use your funds to lobby officials. That's ineligible. And all of these things are in the guidelines. And I really want to recommend, if you've done the application or started the application, but haven't gone back and read that 14 pages of guidelines, please read it. Everything is spelled out there. It may seem really wordy, but the information is in there, and it's going to tell you all the do's and the don'ts for the application. And if you have some questions about what's eligible and what isn't eligible, you can always email us. And if Diana can probably put in the chat our email address that we're using for this grant, and we will get back to you. And it's artgrants@cityofsacramento.org. And I really encourage you, if you have questions after tonight, to email us with that. Other things that are not eligible, murals. A lot of people are coming to us with mural projects, and they're saying, well, it's on a school or it's on a private building. But for this particular grant, based on the guidelines that we were given from the government, we can't do anything that's in a public space. So a sculpture in a public space or a mural in a public space is ineligible for this grant. You can't use the money just to promote your work. That's not a project. Promotion can be part of your work, but it isn't the full project. And I've seen some of these applications. You need to create something, present it, perform it, research it, but no just promotions. So the other thing I want to just talk to you a little bit about, we're having some issues, are the work samples. I think we were pretty clear with the work sample guidelines and what they were, but we're seeing people put in too many work samples. The guidelines are really clear that one work sample is best, but if for some reason the type of work you do really requires you to have 2 work samples, that's as many as we can absolutely take. If you submit 3 or 4 work samples, we're either going to ask you to take one out, but if we don't have time to do that, we're going to tell the panel not to look at one or more of those work samples. And at that point, you're not even going to have the option to choose. So that's why I just really want to reiterate it today. Be really conscious. If you're doing performing in any sort or presenting in any sort that's sort of live, a video is always going to be best. Audio, if it's only an audio project, digital images for most everything else. And obviously, if you're a literary artist doing something on paper, then the PDF. Don't send us any promotional materials. Don't put flyers in there. We're going to take them all out, or we can't take them out, but we're going to tell the panelists not to look at anything that's a promotional material. So please don't put them. And use that work sample description to tell us what we're looking at. So for example, if you're submitting a music video, we'd like to know that you're the person who created the music video, but are you also in the music video? Is this your music? So give us a little bit more information. You can, if you're a visual artist and you're sending us work samples in that way, you can use that little work sample description to tell us what we're seeing, what the medium is for the work. So it's really helpful for the panel to look at that. Don't submit digital images if you're not doing a visual project. Some people just feel like, well, you should see a picture of me standing in a field. That's not really very useful. If you're not doing a visual project, just don't even worry about the digital images. They're not going to help your application. And if you're submitting a work sample of you in another discipline, make sure you've connected it to the work that you're doing. And if there's no connection, don't include it. So for example, if your project is clearly music, it's only going to confuse the panel if you also paint and you're sending us images of your artwork that is painting. Unless those two are connected in this project, really stick with the work sample that ties most closely to the project. And likewise, if your project is totally about making a film and all you submit are digital images, the panel is going to have no way to assess your filmmaking capabilities. So how are they going to know that you can carry that out if they don't see any evidence of it? And once more, best practices for digital images: no people in the photos, don't put yourself next to the artwork, don't show us your artwork laid out, you know, in a selling space. Really just photograph the artwork as best you can, even if you're just using your own camera, just artwork, you know, good quality photography of the artwork so that we can see what it is. And that's really all we need. And then you can use your description to, to tell us what the size is, what the medium is, anything that you think is important. The pathways were something that maybe wasn't totally clear to people. I'm noticing in some cases there's a disconnect between the pathway you choose and what the project is. So if you're choosing creation, make sure that the project is basically you have created something. If you're going to create it and show it, so the focus of the project is perhaps the exhibition, really you're going to have to make a decision. Is it about creating the work or is it about exhibiting the work? And if it's exhibiting, then that would be presentation and performance. Social impact seems a little bit confusing to people. Remember, if you are choosing the social impact pathway, your work should be about that social impact that you want to make using your artwork. Many people incorporate, you know, either political or personal beliefs into their work, but that doesn't necessarily make it a social impact project. And I would really recommend you go back to the guidelines, read the description of social impact, and decide, is my work really best suited to that category? So the last two things that I want to talk about are kind of some of the most important parts of the application. This is where you can really lean in and strengthen your application. And they're the artistic statement, and they're the project concept, two very distinct parts. Each one of these parts has 3 questions or 3 prompts. We really ask you to stick to those 3 prompts. I've noticed people kind of just going off script and just talking about whatever it is they want to talk about, or saying very little at all in these areas. And that's really not going to help your application. And we really want you to be so specific. They're labeled A, B, and C. We're asking you to write A, B, C, and answer them. If any of those parts don't correspond to who you are or the work you do, put not applicable or NA, or, you know, just say this isn't, you know, suitable to my project. That's perfectly fine, but we want to know what you're answering and how you're addressing the things that we've asked you to address. And the most that I'm seeing in the application so far is that people are really confusing what an artist statement is and what the project concept is. So the artist statement section is about who you are as an artist and what your career as an artist has been all about. And this is an opportunity to lean into those questions. So the first part talks about the concepts, inspirations, influences, visions that shape your work. And if you have a special audience in mind, describe that. So this is really what moves you to do your work. I know every one of you can answer that question because you all have inspirations and concepts and influences. So just think about them, talk to your friends or talk to other artists about it if you feel a little bit stuck about that one. How does your body of work advance or expand the field and your discipline? It's really about, are you doing anything new? Are you pushing yourself as an artist? Are you really getting out of your comfort zone? Who are you as an artist and how are you moving along that trajectory? And remember, this is for artists at all points of their career. You could be, you know, an emerging or early stage artist, mid-career artist, or an artist who's been doing this work for a long time. But again, how are you pushing yourself? And any techniques that are important to you in your work. And I think it almost doesn't matter, you know, whatever discipline you're in, there's probably something you can talk about. But if you really feel like, you know, there's not anything specific, I'm a writer, I sit there with a, you know, a computer keyboard, and, you know, feel free to say that. But it's just getting you to think about, you know, how you use your materials. And also about, is there any kind of traditions that you're following? Are there cultural traditions or ethnic traditions that support your work? So we really want you to know that you've told us who you are as an artist. Give us as much as possible. What I'm seeing is too little, that I'm not getting enough about knowing who you are as an artist, because I'm seeing 1 or 2 sentences. Honestly, I don't think you could do an artist statement in 1 or 2 sentences. It doesn't tell us enough. And think about, and this may be the difficult part, there should be some kind of a little string that connects your artist statement to your project concept, so that we see who you are as an artist. And then when you talk about your project, we see why you want to do this project. There's a connect there. We know that it's about who you are, and it feels really authentic to you. So here's an example of everything you've told me about yourself is that you're a street musician that performs in Del Paso Heights. And that's what you've talked about in your artist statement. And now your artist project is, I'm going to present films in Elk Grove. I feel like there's a disconnect. And that may seem like an extreme example, but I'm seeing things that are a little bit like that, which doesn't mean that that's an inappropriate project for you, but give me the steps that got you there. I think that's going to help strengthen it. And lastly, about your project concept is really the work that you're going to carry out if you're funded during that cycle, how it contributes to the pathway, and what the tangible outcome is. If I have to say one flaw in almost, you know, a good number of applications I've seen is, I don't know what the outcome of the project is. If we're giving you $10,000 for a year, at the end of the year, what will you be able to show us? What is the performance going to look like? Where's it going to be, or where would you like it to be? What are you going to make? What are you going to create? Who are you going to engage with? And at the end of that engagement, what is it going to look like? So for every project, we're going to need an outcome. That's a definite. And it's really important that that outcome is something that's doable. If your outcome is really so dependent on one factor that's out of your control, for example, I'm going to do this, you know, great dance performance, and it's going to be at the Sophia Theater because that's the only place in town that can support this. I can't feel in good faith that you can guarantee that you could create a performance that will end up at the Sophia. It might be totally out of your control. The theater might close for 6 months and have no access for you. And then you're going to come to me and say, well, I couldn't really do that project. And I would have to say to you, well, you're going to have to write me a check for $10,000 and to give it back to me. So I don't want that to happen with anybody. So make sure that everything that you project is something that's really doable. And so it's hard because I'm saying be bold and be brave about what you want to do, but make sure it's something that it is within your realm of control. And which doesn't mean if you have to change venues that we're going to, you know, that it's going to be the end of the world. But if the whole project is based on it must be at this venue, then that might be more difficult. So just know that we certainly can be flexible about that, but we would still need it to be performed at a venue. And, you know, we never know what's going to happen. So just think about that. And there just seemed to be a question in that part C that says, what are the issues, concerns, or explorations you plan to address? And it was probably just in the way we worded the questions, but people were interpreting it as, well, I don't really have any concerns. I think I can carry this project out. And that's not what we meant by concern. So really, it's about the issues that you want to address. You know, really be creative about what that is. I think everybody can answer that question in their own way that's very personal and engages them, and it's going to look different for everybody. Not everybody, again, is doing social impact, but some of the issues might just be around your wanting to, you know, explore a new medium of art that you've never been able to really work on before. And the issues are you're being able to really tackle new materials or something like that. So think about that. So again, the thing that I'm getting the most issues with is not telling us enough about the project. So tell us something about you that makes you unique. Please don't just tell us that you're great. I'm seeing a lot of applications where really it's, you should fund me because I'm really a fantastic artist. And I do not doubt that in any way, shape, or form, because you know, there is a lot of great work out there, but that doesn't tell anybody anything. And you know, I think it's just a matter of never having had done this type of an application before. You know, I've seen things, I plan on creating a new society. I'm thinking of calling it X project and it will have a great impact. So sentences like that are not going to be really useful for looking at an application and looking at it critically, again, when you have lots of other applications. So let me think. A project concept is not your personal goals. It's the product that's going to be happening at the end. So just because your goal is to make yourself a better artist, that's not a project concept. Oh, again, and if your category is creation, again, the project should be something kind of new. Don't tell us something that you've already done and you just want to market and call that creation. We're really going to ask you to create something. Let's see. Yeah, I think those are most of the general things. And I feel like I've talked a lot, so I would love to start opening this up for questions and if there's any clarifications of things that that I've asked. So what I'm going to do is ask to see the little hands, and I'm going to go down the list because I think they're going to give them to me in order. So if I see a hand, I will call on you, and then we'll just keep moving to the next person. And then I'll move over to the chat for some questions.